One of the most common frustrations that I hear from most of my corporate clients is they'll say, why is it that we have a generation of young people coming through, that Generation Y cohort, who need to be congratulated for everything they do? They arrive at work in the morning, they walk into the office, and there's almost this expectation that the boss or the manager will say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for being here today. It's just so good to have you with us. And employers will say, well, what is with that? Why do I pay them to be here. Why do I have to thank them as well? And it's a really reasonable question, because the reality is we have a generation of young people coming through who absolutely crave that external positive feedback at all points. Now, why is this? Well, think about it. We've got a generation of young people who grew up in the era of self-esteem. And of course, the era of self-esteem, which was the 80s and the 90s, that was an era when children were told by parents, teachers, society at large, they were given messages exclusively like, you are special, you are magnificent, you are unique, you're going to change the world, you're going to be a leader. You've probably noticed, by the way, that every Gen Y and Gen Z is going to be a leader. I don't know who's going to follow, but they're all going to be leaders. I mean, this is the sort of mentality, because the focus was on building a good self-esteem. Here was the myth. The myth was that we could give self-esteem. It's not true. You can't give someone else self-esteem. That's an internally driven thing. You can foster confidence, you can give encouragement, you can't give self-esteem. But we were so hell-bent on building self-esteem, what we've created in this generation of young people is a degree of dependency. They are often quite high maintenance, that constant need of external validation. Now, when I'm speaking to employers or even educators in the classroom or parents, they'll say, okay, we've got a generation, of course, who need this constant praise. Yeah, but what about when we need to give them some negative feedback? Because you've probably noticed, by the way, that Gen Y don't do very well when they get the opposite of positive affirmation. Even the slightest bit of constructive criticism, they just fold at the knees. Why do you hate me so much? They break into tears. Now, of course, the challenge is they don't do well with negative feedback, and schools sadly have sort of perpetuated that by developing policies like every runner in the race gets a ribbon, what I often refer to as communism on the sports field. This idea that everyone should get the same treatment, regardless of merit or effort applied. All these mentalities where we've even changed the language that we use. In schools, it's not called failure anymore. It's called deferred success, because that's kinder for self-esteem. And so we do have a generation who don't do well with negative feedback. So how do you deal with them? How do you motivate and communicate with a generation who crave the positive and don't do well with the negative? I often see parents, even employers, educators, who realize that they're going to try and break it, break this mentality, and they're going to give them a dose of reality. They give some harsh feedback, and typically all they'll do is kill the relationship in the process. My encouragement with this younger generation is, recognize that they only have ears for positive feedback. It's what they've been conditioned to hear and understand. So use positive feedback in a strategic way. My encouragement is, when you're giving praise and feedback to Generation Y and even Gen Z young people, give it proportionately. In two ways. Give praise and feedback to young people in proportion to two things. Firstly, in proportion to not just the person, but also the performance. And it's got to be both. It can't just be you're valuable because of what you do, but it also can't be you're valuable just because you're innately and uniquely brilliant, because that tends to breed a sense of entitlement. Well, why would I try if I'm already amazing as it is? But the second thing, of course, is to give praise and feedback that is proportionate to the effort applied, or what it is that they've overcome, as opposed to making a big deal over very small things. So while this high maintenance generation can be difficult to work with, it is critical we don't destroy the relationship by just giving negative praise without realizing that positive reaffirmation is the best way to get through to them. It's about how you do it that counts.